If someone had told me I'd hide my wealth just to see who would love my son without a price tag, I would have said I was done with games. It was a little after 7 p.m. when June Carter eased her rusty sedan to a stop outside a modest house on Portland's outskirts. Rain battered the windshield, smearing the view of a sagging wooden fence and a porch light that flickered like it was on its last breath. She drew a long, steadying inhale, fingers tightening on the steering wheel. Another interview, another frantic bid to keep her life from caving in. $20 in her wallet. Rent 3 days late. A mother in the hospital who needed medication by morning. If she didn't get this job, she had no idea what came next. She stepped into the cold, tugged her coat closer around her, and walked to the door. Then, with knuckles that felt heavier than they should, she knocked twice. What she didn't know was that behind that peeling door wasn't just a simple nanny position. It was the beginning of something that would break her, remake her, and change the course of her entire life. The door creaked open. A boy of about 6 stood there barefoot, clutching a stuffed bear. His brown curls were a mess, his eyes guarded, but curious. "Mom," he called out behind him. "The lady's here." Moments later, a woman appeared at the end of the hall, tall, effortlessly elegant, even in jeans and a plain hoodie, her hair tied in a messy bun. Her presence filled the room with a quiet authority that struck June instantly. "Hi," the woman said, her voice soft but firm. "I'm Sloane." June extended her hand, trying to seem professional. "June Carter. I'm here for the nanny job." Sloane didn't shake her hand. She just looked at her long and direct, like she was trying to see beneath June's skin. After a long pause, she said, "Come in." The warmth of the house was a welcome contrast to the storm outside, but June couldn't ignore the feeling that something was off. The furniture looked secondhand. The walls had cracks, and yet everything was too intentionally humble. Clean, neat, not a speck out of place. Sloane gestured for her to sit on the couch. "This is my son, Luca," she said, watching her son closely. June smiled at him, trying to make a connection. "Hi, Luca. I like your bear. Hey, if you're enjoying this story, go ahead and drop a like to help us grow even more, and let me know in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, what score would you give this story so far? Your feedback makes all the difference." The boy didn't answer, but something in his expression softened. Sloane, however, remained unreadable. "Why do you want this job?" she asked. No pleasantries, no small talk. June swallowed. "Because I need it. I love kids and I'm good with them. I worked with children before, but I had to leave to take care of my mom. She's ill." Sloane's gaze didn't waver. "What about your own kids?" "I don't have any," June answered, her voice more defensive than she intended. Sloane nodded slowly. "You'll live in the rooms upstairs. If Luca likes you, you stay. If he doesn't, you're out by the end of the week." It wasn't a job offer. It was a test. June nodded anyway. "All right." Later that night, June stood alone in the tiny room upstairs, looking out at the rain-soaked yard. Everything about Sloane bothered her. How guarded she was. How cold yet intoxicatingly magnetic her presence felt. It was ridiculous. But something deep in June's gut whispered, she's hiding something. What she didn't expect was that Sloane at that very same moment stood in her own room downstairs, watching June on a small monitor, a nanny cam. Her arms were crossed, her expression unreadable. Luca had liked her. That much was clear. But Sloane didn't care about that. Not really. She was watching June because she needed to know one thing. Could this woman be trusted not just with her son, but with the truth? Because Sloane Ashford wasn't poor. Not even close. She was the CEO of a luxury real estate empire worth over $200 million. And the house June now lived in, it was one of her old investment properties. Stripped down and deliberately made to look humble. Sloane had been burned too many times. Everyone wanted something from her: money, connections, power. But now she had only one goal: Find someone who would love her son not for what he could offer, but for who he was. What Sloane hadn't expected, though, was the way her own chest had tightened when she looked into June's eyes. The way the woman's voice lingered in her head even now. The plan was to test the nanny, to test her intentions. But as she watched June fall asleep on that narrow bed, Sloane felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Intrigue and worse desire. She turned off the monitor, walked to the window, lit a cigarette with trembling fingers. She hadn't expected her to walk through that door, and she sure as hell hadn't expected to feel anything. Sloane exhaled slowly into the glass and muttered to herself, "You're playing with fire, Ashford." But deep down, she already knew. The fire had started the moment June walked into the house, and there would be no turning back. The next morning, June woke to the sound of birds and the scent of coffee drifting faintly through the air. For a second, her brain forgot where she was. Then the memory of the previous night rushed back. The storm, the interview, the house that didn't feel quite real. She rubbed the sleep from her eyes and pulled her tangled hair into a loose bun. Before making her way downstairs, Sloane stood in the kitchen barefoot, pouring orange juice into 2 glasses. Her movements were precise, deliberate, elegant in a way that didn't match the peeling linoleum floors or the scratched countertops. June hovered by the doorway, unsure if she was supposed to speak first. Sloane didn't even glance up. "There's toast," she said flatly. "He likes it with strawberry jam. Who does Luca? He's picky with breakfast. Won't eat if you don't slice the toast diagonally." It was an order masked as information. June stepped forward silently and began to prepare the plate. She wasn't going to let this woman intimidate her, even if her voice made her knees go soft. Luca appeared minutes later, dragging his stuffed bear behind him and blinking up at June with cautious eyes. She smiled and knelt down. "Good morning, Luca. I made toast the way your mom said you like it." The boy hesitated, then took the plate and sat at the table. No words, but no resistance either. Sloane watched all of it in silence, her eyes dark and unreadable. June couldn't tell if she was being judged or studied. Maybe both. "Do I pass the first test?" June asked with a soft smirk, trying to lighten the air. Sloane's lips twitched. "You're not here for me. You're here for him." But her eyes lingered a second too long. June felt it, a flicker, almost imperceptible. The day passed slowly with Luca cautiously opening up in small ways. He didn't talk much, but he began to follow June around, mimicking her movements, handing her toys wordlessly, even holding her hand when they walked to the backyard. Sloane watched it all from the shadows, keeping her distance. Every laugh from her son tugged at something raw inside her, something old and painful. The part of her that still hadn't forgiven herself for marrying the wrong person, for bringing Luca into a world full of false smiles and greed. She hadn't just lost millions in her divorce. She lost her ability to trust anyone, especially women who smiled easily. But June wasn't like the others. She wasn't polished or poised. She had chipped nails, a coffee stain on her jeans, and a fire behind her eyes that Sloane couldn't stop looking at. She didn't flirt, didn't try to impress. She just was. And that unsettled Sloane more than she'd admit. That night, June sat alone on the porch steps, the air crisp and quiet, Luca asleep upstairs. She hugged her knees to her chest, staring up at the sky. She felt strange, like she'd stepped into someone else's life and wasn't sure how to play her part. Then the screen door creaked open. Sloane barefoot again, a glass of wine in one hand. She sat beside her without a word. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then Sloane said softly, "He laughed with you today." June looked over, surprised by the softness in her voice. "He's a sweet kid. He just needs someone who sees him." "And do you?" Sloane asked, eyes locked on hers. "See him?" June didn't flinch. "I do." Sloane took a sip of wine, her jaw tightening slightly. "Most women who apply for this job ask about salary first. You didn't. I didn't care." It was infuriating, dangerous, and far too tempting. Upstairs, June was helping Luca tie his shoes. "You did it better than yesterday," she smiled, brushing a curl from his forehead. He looked up at her, finally speaking more than a few words. "You're not like the other ones." June paused, heart squeezing. "What do you mean?" "They were pretty, but fake." He said it like it was the most normal observation in the world. "Mom didn't smile at them." June blinked, caught off guard. "And does she smile at me?" Luca shrugged. "She looks at you more when you're not looking." June's heart skipped. She couldn't explain it, but from the beginning, something in her head had pulled toward Sloane like gravity. She was difficult and closed off. Yes, but there was also something soft buried beneath the armor. Something fragile that made June want to reach for it, even when it pushed her away. Downstairs, Sloane stood at the bottom of the staircase, having heard the entire exchange. She hated that her walls were so thin. Hated even more how hearing her son say those words made her chest ache in ways she hadn't allowed in years. She didn't want June to see her. Not fully. Not when she wasn't even sure who she was outside the empire she had built and the lies she now lived in. When June finally descended with Luca, Sloane was already pretending to scroll her phone. "We'll be out for most of the day," she said casually. "You'll have the house to yourself." June frowned slightly. "Is there something you need me to do while you're gone?" Sloane didn't look up. "Just don't go in the basement. There's mold. Dangerous." It was a lie, but a necessary one. The basement held files, documents, clues to who Sloane really was. And it wasn't time for that part of the truth. June nodded slowly, curiosity already rising in her chest. After they left, the house felt too quiet, too staged. Every drawer was perfectly organized, every photo frame dustless, and yet not a single personal item in sight. No baby pictures, no old toys, no clutter. Nothing that felt like a life had actually been lived there. June's instincts tingled. Something didn't add up. Hours passed and she found herself pacing. She didn't want to snoop, but part of her felt like she was living inside a story that didn't make sense. Like reading a book with pages torn out. She walked to the basement door, hesitating. Sloane had told her not to, but something inside her whispered, "Just look, just once." She opened the door slowly. The stairs creaked beneath her feet. The light flickered as she reached the bottom. There were boxes, dozens of them, labeled with numbers and vague descriptions. She knelt, opened one, and her breath caught. Magazines, articles, news clippings, all about Sloane Ashford, billionaire, CEO, divorce scandal. June's fingers trembled as she flipped through them. She stared at a glossy photo of Sloane on the cover of Forbes, dressed in a tailored suit. Chin high, eyes cold. Nothing like the woman upstairs who wore old hoodies and pretended to be scraping by. It was a lie, all of it. June backed away, her mind spinning. Why would someone like Sloane pretend to live like this? Why hide her wealth? Was this all just a twisted experiment? She felt betrayed, manipulated. But underneath the confusion, there was something else. Fear. Because if Sloane was lying about this, what else was she hiding? And yet, despite everything, June couldn't shake the memory of their moment on the porch. The way Sloane had looked at her like she was the only person who'd ever dared to see beyond the surface. When Sloane returned later that evening, Luca ran to his room and June stood in the hallway, arms crossed. "We need to talk," she said, voice low, restrained. Sloane's eyes narrowed. "About what?" "About you," June snapped. "Or whoever you're pretending to be." Sloane didn't flinch, didn't panic. She simply sighed, ran a hand through her hair and said, "You went in the basement. You lied to me." June shot back. "You lied about everything." Sloane's expression shifted. Something tight in her jaw. Something vulnerable that flickered just for a second. "It wasn't a lie," she said finally. "It was a test." "A test?" June repeated, incredulous. "Are you serious?" "Yes. And you failed." Sloane turned away, walking toward the kitchen. You went looking. That tells me everything I need to know. No, June said, following her. You don't get to flip this on me. You set this up. You manipulated me. Your son, everyone. Sloane's voice turned sharp. I did what I had to do. You think I don't know what people do when they see money? You think I haven't watched them pretend to love my son just to get close to me? June stared at her. And what about me? You think I'm like them? Sloane's silence was answer enough. June's eyes burned. I trusted you. I cared about your son. And maybe I started to care about you, too. But clearly that was my mistake. She turned to leave, but Sloane's voice stopped her. Don't walk away. June froze. Why? So, you can watch me some more. Test me again. Sloane stepped closer, and for the first time her mask cracked. Because I haven't stopped thinking about you since the second you walked through that door. June's breath caught. Sloane was inches away now. Her eyes dark, stormy, desperate. I didn't plan this. You weren't supposed to matter. But I do. June whispered. Sloane didn't deny it. Didn't move. Just looked at her like she was breaking apart inside. And June, she had no idea whether she wanted to kiss her or slap her. All she knew was that something irreversible had just happened between them, and it was far too late to undo it. June didn't sleep. Her body lay still in the narrow bed, but her mind was a wildfire. Sloane's words kept echoing in her head. You weren't supposed to matter. It should have made her angry. It should have sealed her decision to pack her things and leave that house before dawn. But it didn't, because the way Sloane had looked at her when she said it, like every wall she'd ever built was crumbling all at once, had ignited something far more dangerous than rage. Understanding, and worse, longing. Sloane Ashford was a liar, yes, but not the kind June expected. She wasn't hiding her money because she was ashamed of it. She was hiding herself because somewhere deep down she was still broken, still bleeding. And June knew what that felt like. Morning came too fast. June moved through the kitchen on autopilot, preparing breakfast before Luca even stirred. She didn't see Sloane until the boy was already seated at the table. Sloane entered quietly, wearing a loose gray sweater that slipped slightly off one shoulder. Hair pulled back in a messy knot. She didn't look like a billionaire today. She looked tired, human. For the first time, June didn't look away. She held Sloane's eyes with a steadiness that made the air in the room shift. I'm not leaving, she said calmly. Sloane blinked, clearly surprised. You're not? No, not until we talk properly. Not in half-truths. Not in tests. Just talk like to people who are both exhausted and have too many secrets. Sloane hesitated, then nodded barely. Luca was the buffer for most of the morning. June kept him entertained with finger painting and makeshift blanket forts in the living room, while Sloane lingered nearby, her eyes softening every time she caught June laughing with her son. There was a quiet intimacy in how June moved through the house, as if she belonged there. Sloane hated how much that pleased her. The ease held until Luca went down for his nap. Then the tension rushed back, sharp and undeniable. June perched on the armrest, arms folded. Sloane stood at the window, late morning sun slicing across her face. So, June said, what now? Sloane didn't turn. You figured out who I am. That I'm rich. That this place is a set piece. Yes, and I want to know why. Sloane faced her slowly. Because money wrecked everything, my marriage, my friendships, my name. Every woman I dated saw the account balance. Not me. Not even after Luca. I thought if I stripped it all away, someone might show up for him. For him? June's voice softened. Not for the life you could give them. Sloane's gaze flickered. I wasn't looking for someone to show up for me. Then why are we standing here like this? June asked, a tremor in her voice. Sloane stepped closer. Because I can't stop thinking about you. I tried to file you as a test, another box to check. But every time you laugh with Luca, or roll your eyes at me like you're not afraid, or argue with every word I say, it gets harder to pretend I don't feel something. June's heart kicked. You feel something? God help me, Sloane whispered. I do, and it scares me. They were close now to close. June felt the warmth of Sloane's breath, the way her eyes studied her, as if trying to memorize her face. June didn't know when her hand lifted, only that her fingertips were brushing Sloane's jaw. Light and unsure. You don't get to pull me in and push me away, she murmured. Not when there's something real between us. Sloane's lips parted, like confession was coming. But no words followed. She just breathed her in. For a heartbeat. June thought Sloane would lean forward and the space would finally disappear until Luca's cry upstairs shattered the moment. Sloane stepped back, walls flying up on instinct. I should check on him, she said, clipped. And then she was gone. June stayed where she was, hands suspended in the air, skin tingling with the almost of it. The rest of the day passed in quiet. Sloane kept her distance. June didn't press. But that night, after Luca slept and the house fell still again, June found herself at Sloane's bedroom door. She knocked once, no answer. Then slowly the door opened. Sloane stood there, not surprised, like she'd been waiting. Neither spoke. June stepped inside. The room smelled like clean linen and rain. Sloane stood by the window, staring out. You shouldn't be here, she said, but there was no conviction in her voice. June walked toward her. Then tell me to leave. Sloane didn't. She turned slowly, and their eyes met again, this time full of everything they hadn't said. And when June reached out this time, Sloane didn't move away. She let herself be touched, let herself feel their foreheads pressed together, breath mingling, no words, just heat and silence and the unbearable closeness of two people who had been denying themselves far too long. Sloane's hand moved to June's waist, tentative, trembling. June's fingers tangled in Sloane's sweater, pulling her just enough to feel the tension snap. They didn't kiss. Not yet. But the weight of the moment was louder than any kiss could be. June pulled back just slightly. When you're ready to stop hiding, she whispered, I'll still be here. Then she turned and walked out of the room, heart pounding, body on fire, leaving Sloane breathless and shaken in the dark. Sloane leaned back against the wall, her chest heaving, her hands trembling. She had tried so hard to keep her world under control. But June was chaos in its most beautiful form, and Sloane didn't know how much longer she could resist letting the chaos in. Sloane hadn't moved in over an hour. The house was silent except for the occasional creak of the wood as it settled in the night. But inside her chest, everything was loud. Her pulse, her breath, her guilt, her longing. June had left her standing in the middle of the room with her heart in her hands, not demanding anything. Not accusing her, just offering something real, something terrifying. And Sloane didn't know what to do with it, because everything in her life had been built on control, on armor, on distance. And June had stripped that away with nothing more than a whisper and a touch. Sloane wanted to run, but more than that, she wanted to follow her. The next day began with quiet tension that neither woman dared to name. Sloane kept her distance, sticking to her office, pretending to work. June spent most of the morning with Luca, but she felt Sloane's presence like static in the walls, like gravity shifting every time they were near each other. At lunch, they crossed paths in the hallway. Just a second, just one look, but it was enough to make June's stomach twist and Sloane's fingers clench against the door frame. Nothing was said, nothing needed to be. That afternoon, Sloane's phone rang while she was in the kitchen. She answered out of habit, expecting a telemarketer, or maybe one of her contractors. Instead, a familiar voice oozed through the receiver. Sloane, you've been very quiet lately. Her ex-wife, Serena, poison disguised as silk. Sloane's entire body tensed. What do you want? She asked, voice cold. Serena laughed softly. I just wanted to remind you about our agreement. I stay quiet. You stay out of the press. But then I heard a little rumor. Something about you living like a peasant in the suburbs with a new companion. Sloane's blood went ice cold. You've been watching me? Of course I have. Serena purred. You think you can disappear and play single mom in a fairy tale while I sit back and watch you get adored? Not a chance. You left me with nothing but lawyers and humiliation. You owe me. Sloane's grip on the phone tightened. If you touch my son, relax, Serena interrupted. I'm not a monster. I just want you to remember who you are and who I am, because if I don't get what I want soon, well, I'm sure the tabloids would love to know where the queen of real estate has been hiding. Sloane ended the call with a trembling hand. Her chest was tight. The past was closing in again, slithering under the floorboards, poisoning every breath. She poured a glass of water and stared out the window. And then suddenly June was there, not speaking, just watching her. Sloane turned slowly. How much did you hear? Enough, June said softly. She threatened you. Sloane looked away. She's just trying to rattle me. She always does. And is it working? June asked, stepping closer. Sloane didn't answer. Her silence was louder than any confession. June stopped a few feet away, crossing her arms. You keep saying you want someone to love your son for who he is, not what you have. But what about you? Do you even believe you deserve love anymore? Sloane's head snapped toward her. Don't. Why not? June pushed. Because it's easier to pretend you're untouchable. Because if no one gets in, no one can hurt you. Sloane's voice cracked when she finally spoke. Because every time I let someone in, they break something. June took a slow breath. I'm not her, and I'm not here for your money. I'm here because I see how Luca looks at you, because I see how hard you try, because despite everything, I think you might be the loneliest woman I've ever met and the bravest. Sloane blinked and a tear she didn't permit slipped out. She turned away quickly, but June stepped closer. Look at me, she whispered. Sloane didn't move, so June reached for her hand, and for the first time, Sloane let someone hold it. They stood like that in the kitchen, two women suspended in a moment that neither had planned for. The air between them vibrated with tension, fear, desire, hope. Sloane finally turned just enough to meet June's eyes. If I let you in, if I fall, I don't know who I'll be on the other side. June stepped in even closer, their foreheads nearly touching. Then, let's find out together. And then, finally, Sloane kissed her. It wasn't delicate. It wasn't hesitant. It was months of loneliness crashing into a single act of surrender. Sloane's hands cupped June's face like she didn't know whether to worship her or cling to her for balance. June kissed her back with equal fire, her fingers digging into Sloane's waist, pulling her closer, grounding her. The kiss deepened, breath tangled, bodies pressed. The kitchen faded, the world shrank. There was only this, the taste of trust, of vulnerability offered and accepted. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Sloane touched her forehead to June's. You terrify me, she whispered. June smiled. Good. That means it's real. Sloane exhaled a shaky laugh, and for the first time in years, it wasn't bitter. But upstairs, a soft sound made them freeze. Footsteps. Luca. Sloane straightened, pulling herself together fast. June stepped back, lips still tingling. Their moment for now was over. Sloane turned toward the stairs just as Luca appeared, holding his bear, his eyes sleepy. I had a bad dream, he said softly. Sloane walked to him, crouching. It's okay, baby. I'm here. June watched them from the hallway, heart swelling in a way she hadn't expected, not just because of the kiss, but because this was what she'd been missing for so long. Something real, something worth fighting for. But as she turned to go back to her room, her phone buzzed with an anonymous message. Just a single line. You should ask Sloane what really happened in her divorce. June's heart dropped because love was never simple and the past was never done. June couldn't sleep. Not after the kiss. Not after the message. Her fingers still trembled with the memory of Sloane's lips on hers. The press of their bodies. The heat that surged between them like something unstoppable. But that text, it was like a hand gripping her chest, pulling her back into the cold. She stared at her phone screen in the dark for what felt like hours, rereading those words over and over again. You should ask Sloane what really happened in her divorce. The message had no sender, no number, no trace. Just a whisper of poison meant to unravel everything that had just been built between them. June didn't want to believe it. She didn't, but she also couldn't ignore it. Sloane had been guarded from the start, and while she had finally opened up, at least a little, there were still entire parts of her life locked away, wrapped in silence. Morning came too quickly. Sloane was in the kitchen again, making pancakes with Luca, laughing softly at something he'd said. It was strange seeing her like that, like nothing had happened the night before, like she hadn't kissed June with a kind of desperation that echoed all night in her bones. June stood in the doorway for a moment watching them. Sloane looked up and smiled, warm and real, and that made it worse. Later, when Luca went to play with his building blocks, June followed Sloane into the laundry room. Sloane was folding sheets, casual, humming under her breath. "We need to talk," June said, trying to keep her voice even. Sloane didn't look up. "I was hoping you'd say that." June stepped closer. "I got a message last night, an anonymous one. It said I should ask you what really happened in your divorce." Sloane froze. The fabric in her hands slipped to the floor. For a full 5 seconds, she didn't move. Then she slowly straightened her back to June. "I was wondering how long it would take." "So, it's true." Sloane turned around, arms crossed now, her face guarded. "What part?" "I don't know." June snapped. "Because you've told me nothing about it." Sloane's jaw tightened. "Because it's mine. And you think keeping it locked away will protect you or me?" "It's not about protection," Sloane said sharply. "It's about survival." June exhaled, stepping back. "Sloane, if we're going to be anything real, I can't be in the dark like this." "I won't." Sloane closed her eyes. The silence stretched between them, painful and thick. Then finally, she spoke. "Serena and I met when I was 24. She was a corporate lawyer, smart, charming, polished. I thought she was everything I wanted. Someone who could keep up. Someone who understood the pressure of my world. We got married fast. She helped me build the company. But everything came with conditions. Love was conditional. Affection was conditional. Even her interest in Luca when he was born depended on whether he fit into her life, her plans." June listened, breath held. She cheated repeatedly. But every time I confronted her, she flipped it. Said I was the problem. That I was emotionally distant. That I was too obsessed with control. And maybe she was right. I was cold. I was closed off. But only because every time I opened up, she weaponized it. Sloane's voice cracked. And then when I finally filed for divorce, she threatened to go public. Said she'd paint me as unfit. Said I was manipulative. That I used Luca as a pawn. So I paid her off a lot. I gave her money, silence, everything she asked for just to keep my son out of it. June stepped closer gently this time. "Sloane, I'm so sorry." Sloane looked at her, eyes raw. "I don't tell people that story because it makes me look like a woman who let herself be destroyed by love. And I hate that. I hate that I still flinch every time someone gets too close." June swallowed the lump in her throat. "You didn't let her destroy you. You survived her." Sloane shook her head. "And now you know. If that changes anything for you, I understand." June didn't hesitate. She reached for Sloane's hand and held it tight. "It doesn't, but I need to ask you something else." Sloane nodded cautiously. "Was I part of another test? After the kiss, was that real?" Sloane didn't speak immediately, but then she stepped forward and touched June's cheek, her thumb brushing the skin like she was afraid she'd disappear. "It was the most real thing I felt in years." June closed her eyes, exhaling slowly. The weight in her chest eased, not completely, but enough. Sloane leaned in then, pressing her forehead against June's. "Stay," she whispered. "Even if I'm still a mess." June nodded. I'm not going anywhere. They didn't kiss this time. They didn't need to. The connection between them was already stronger than words, deeper than touch. But the world outside their little house wasn't done with them yet. Because later that night, Sloane's security system sent her a silent alert. A private investigator had been spotted on the edge of the property, watching, waiting. Sloane stared at the screen, her heart thundering. Serena was done being subtle, and she was coming for them. Sloane didn't sleep that night. The silent alert from the security system kept flashing in her mind. The timestamp burned behind her eyes. 11:43 p.m. Someone had been standing just outside the tree line behind the property. Not moving, just watching. Serena, it had to be. Sloane had seen her do it before, sending investigators to trail her, leak subtle rumors. Always careful never to do anything technically illegal, just enough to rattle the cage. Sloane paced the bedroom like a ghost, fists clenched, trying to decide whether to wake June or pretend she could handle it alone. But she already knew the answer. She couldn't handle this alone anymore. Not when June had kissed her like she was worth more than every dollar Sloane had ever made. By morning, she was downstairs early, coffee untouched, staring blankly at her laptop. When June entered the room, Sloane didn't even notice until a hand gently touched her shoulder. "You didn't sleep," June said, her voice low. Sloane didn't lie. There was someone outside the property last night. June's eyes widened. "What? Did you call the police?" "No, they didn't step onto the land. It was someone watching, waiting, and I know who sent them." Sloane turned her laptop toward June. An open file, photos, surveillance stills. Serena stepping out of a black SUV last month. Her perfectly composed face. Her perfect lies. "She's escalating," Sloane whispered. "She's never shown up this close before. And if she's here, she's not just watching me. She's watching you. Watching Luca." June sat slowly, heart pounding. "What does she want?" Sloane looked down. "Me in control. Silent alone." June's hand reached across the table, lacing their fingers. "Then you're not giving her what she wants." "Not this time." Sloane closed her eyes. "She'll use Luca if she has to. And you'll protect him," June said firmly. "We'll protect him. But you have to stop running. You can't hide anymore. Not from her. Not from yourself." Sloane looked up and something shifted in her eyes. "Resolve. Then we do it together." Later that day, Sloane called her legal team quietly, discreetly. She didn't tell them everything. Not yet. But she told them enough. "If Serena tries anything," she said, "I want her met with fire." June watched the transformation with awe. The softness that lived in Sloane around Luca hadn't vanished. It had simply made room for steel. For the woman she used to be. The CEO. The fighter. The protector. Sloane Ashford was coming back. But Serena wasn't sitting still either. 3 days passed in uneasy peace. June and Sloane fell into a rhythm, working together during the day, sharing glances that lingered too long, brushing hands when no one was watching. At night, their connection deepened. Not physically, not yet, but emotionally, in whispers and stolen laughter. In quiet moments when they both forgot to be afraid, Luca began asking June to read him bedtime stories. He hugged her without hesitation. He started calling her Jules, and Sloane noticed the way it made June melt every time. But on the 4th morning, everything cracked. A sleek black car pulled into the driveway. Uninvited, Sloane saw it from the kitchen window and went rigid. June was helping Luca with breakfast, but froze when she saw Sloane's expression. "Who is it?" "Her." Before June could react, the doorbell rang. Sloane moved like a machine. Each step heavy, inevitable. She opened the door, and there she was. Serena, still beautiful, still venom and silk, dressed in an ivory coat. Sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. "Sloane," she said with mock sweetness. "You look domestic." Sloane didn't flinch. "What do you want?" Serena stepped inside like she owned the air. "To see my son, of course." Don't I have that right? June stepped into the hallway at that moment, placing herself between Luca and the scene unfolding. Sloane moved instantly, blocking Serena's line of sight. You gave up that right the day you walked away from him. Serena's lips curled. You mean the day you paid me to disappear? Funny how that works. Sloane's voice was still. Leave. Not yet, Serena said, stepping closer. Because I see you've replaced me rather quickly, I might add. The nanny really? Does she even know what kind of monster you were during our marriage? June's eyes blazed, but Sloane held up a hand to stop her. Get out, she said again. Before I have you removed. Serena tilted her head. Don't be dramatic. I'm only here to remind you you're vulnerable, that your little fantasy won't last. You think hiding in a shack with a babysitter is love? You think this ends quietly? I made you, Sloane. I own you. Push me again and I'll remind the world exactly who you are. Sloane's jaw tightened, but she refused the bait. Instead, she stepped aside. Then go remind them. And while you're at it, remind them why you settled. Remind them you took the money and ran. Remind them who walked out on a child. Because you couldn't handle being second to someone more important than you. Serena's smile slipped just a fraction. Enough. She turned for the door, cold fury in every step. This isn't over, she hissed. When the car finally vanished, Sloane shut the door and leaned against it, breath unsteady. June moved to her at once, arms around her, holding her together, grounding her. I'm sorry, Sloane whispered. You don't have to be, June said. Not anymore. Neither of them saw the envelope Serena left on the porch. Inside, a photo of June, a full dossier, debts, history, her mother's hospital records, everything, and a note in sharp red ink. Does she love your son? Or does she just need the money? Sloane found it an hour later, tucked by the welcome mat placed just so, as if by accident. But Sloane knew Serena's games. Nothing she did was accidental. With cold fingers, Sloane knelt and picked it up, pulse already racing. She didn't need to open it to know it would cut. She felt the blade of it, precise, personal. She carried it to the living room like it might explode, sat on the edge of the couch, and carefully broke the seal. What she saw caved her chest in. June's face in glossy black and white. Full name, past, employment timeline, outstanding debts, medical bills from her mother's treatments, even a photo of June speaking to a nurse outside the hospital, exhaustion etched into her features. The last page was handwritten in Serena's elegant, slanted script. She says she loves your son. How much is that love worth? Would she still be here if she knew who you were, or if there were nothing left to gain? Sloane sat perfectly still for a long time. No trembling hands, no twitch of expression. But inside, something was splitting open. She had fought so hard to keep Luca safe, to keep her own heart guarded, to find someone who wouldn't see her as a bank account. And now this file, this violation was telling her she'd been wrong all over again. That June was just like everyone else. But Sloane didn't believe it. Not at first. Then doubt crept in. She hadn't asked June much about her life before. She hadn't wanted to scare her away. She'd assumed the kindness, the warmth, the connection. It had all been real. But now, every smile, every touch, every look came under a different light. Was June just in need? Was this all about security? Upstairs, June was folding Luca's laundry when she heard the front door slam hard. She rushed down to find Sloane pacing, the envelope open on the table. Sloane's back was rigid, cold. Sloane? June asked, voice cautious. What's going on? Sloane turned around slowly. Her eyes were unreadable. Did you think I wouldn't find out? She said quietly. June's stomach dropped. Find out what? Sloane picked up the file and let it fall open. That your mother's hospital bills are piling up. That you're behind on rent. That your credit's a mess. That you're drowning, June. And somehow you never thought to mention that to the woman who just happens to be a millionaire. June froze, breath knocked out of her. You went digging through my life. I didn't, Sloane said. She did. She pointed at the note. Serena left this. June's eyes widened as she realized the truth. You read it and you believed her. I don't know what to believe right now, Sloane snapped. I want to believe you're not like the others. But you didn't tell me any of this. You kept it hidden. Because it's not your responsibility, June said, voice rising. Because I didn't want pity. I didn't want your money. I came here for a job, Sloane. I stayed because of Luca. I kissed you because of you. Sloane looked away, jaw tight. June stepped forward. You think I planned this? That I faked everything to get access to your bank account? That I used your son like some kind of ticket? I don't know, Sloane whispered. That's the problem. The silence between them turned to ice. June's voice broke. You know, for someone who wants to be seen so badly, you really don't give anyone the chance. Sloane flinched. June shook her head. I loved your son before I even knew your last name. Before I knew you were rich, and I didn't tell you about my mom or the debts. Because I didn't want that to be what defined me. But maybe you need someone to be a threat. Maybe you don't know how to love without fear. She turned to leave. Sloane's voice came soft. June. But June didn't stop. You know where to find me, she said without turning back. If you ever decide to believe in something other than your trauma. She left the house, walked down the driveway, out into the wind, her heart shattering with every step. Inside, Sloane collapsed onto the couch, covering her face with both hands. She didn't cry. She couldn't. All she felt was the dull, numbing weight of loss. The sound of a door closing that had taken her years to open. Upstairs, Luca came to the top of the stairs holding his bear. Where's Jules? He asked softly. Sloane couldn't answer. The next day passed in gray silence. Sloane barely spoke. Luca asked for June for times, then stopped asking. The house felt empty again. Hollow. Sloane sat in her office late at night, staring at the open file, staring at June's name, her photo, her strength. And she finally realized something. June hadn't asked for help. She hadn't used Luca. She had done the one thing Sloane never expected from anyone. She had stayed even when she had nothing to gain. And Sloane had let her go. The next morning, Sloane got out of her car and drove. No assistant, no driver, no excuses. She drove across the city to the last address June had given on her nanny application. A crumbling apartment complex near the hospital. She knocked on the door. It was opened by an older woman in a wheelchair. Thin, pale, but her eyes were kind. You must be Sloane, the woman said gently. Sloane blinked. She told you about me? She talks about you every night. She thinks you hate her. Sloane swallowed hard. She's wrong. The woman nodded once. She's at the hospital. Volunteer shift. Go. Sloane went. She found June in the hallway outside her mother's room, speaking with a nurse. June looked tired, smaller somehow, but when she turned and saw Sloane, something bright flickered behind her eyes before she buried it. What are you doing here? June asked, voice careful. Sloane stepped forward. To apologize. For everything. For not trusting you. For letting her poison my mind again. For not being brave enough to love you out loud. June said nothing. You were never the test, Sloane added. June, I was. June said quietly. And I failed. A long beat. June looked down, then up again. Then I guess you get another chance. This time, when Sloane reached for her hand, June didn't let go. The drive back to the house was quiet, but not heavy. Sloane's fingers rested lightly on June's knee the whole way, a soft, grounding touch, an unspoken promise. I'm here now. I'm not running again. June didn't speak either. She didn't have to. Her eyes carried the message. There was pain, yes, but beneath it something stronger. Belief, not only in Sloane, but in what they were building. When they pulled into the driveway, Luca was already at the window. The second he saw June, his face lit like the sun returning. He flew to the door, flung it open, and launched into her arms. "You left," he said softly, arms looped around her neck. June held him tight, eyes stinging. "I didn't want to. I missed you. Mom missed you too," he added. She cried when she thought I was sleeping. June looked over his shoulder to Sloane. And Sloane, standing in the doorway, didn't look away. She didn't hide. Not anymore. That night, everything changed. Sloane made dinner. Real dinner. No takeout. No rushed pasta. She wore an apron over her cashmere sweater and danced to old jazz, while June chopped vegetables beside her. It felt absurdly domestic and also perfect. Luca helped set the table. They ate together, laughed, talked, and when Luca finally fell asleep on the couch watching a movie, Sloane carried him upstairs, tucked him in, and kissed his forehead like nothing in the world mattered more. When she came back down, June was waiting in the kitchen, barefoot, leaning against the counter. Their eyes met. No more hesitation. Sloane walked straight to her. June reached for her, and this time there was no storm outside, no interruptions. The kiss was slow, deep, familiar now, but still electrifying. Sloane's hands cupped June's face, her thumbs brushing her cheeks like she still couldn't believe she was real. June's fingers slid under the hem of Sloane's sweater, her palms resting against warm skin, feeling her breathe. When Sloane pressed her body against hers, everything else melted away. The past, the fear, the lies. It didn't matter. Not in that kitchen. Not with the woman who'd stopped running. Sloane broke the kiss just enough to whisper, "Come with me." June didn't ask where. She just followed. Upstairs, Sloane's bedroom was dim, the only light coming from the window. Sloane turned, suddenly unsure. But June reached out, taking her hands, and said, "Don't be afraid of being wanted." That was all it took. Their bodies met like a sigh and a gasp all at once. Clothes slipped away in quiet urgency. Skin found skin. Hands learned each other with reverence and hunger. Sloane's breath hitched when June kissed down her collarbone, like every touch was stitching something broken back together. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The way Sloane trembled beneath her. The way June whispered her name like a promise against her skin. The way they moved in sync. It was enough. Later, tangled in soft sheets, Sloane lay with her head on June's chest, listening to her heartbeat. "I don't want this to be a secret anymore," she said softly. "Then don't," June replied. Sloane looked up. "I want the world to know that I love you. That you're not the help. That you're not a project. That you're the woman I choose." June smiled, running her fingers through Sloane's hair. "So, choose me." "Every day I will," Sloane whispered. "I swear." The next morning, Sloane didn't go to her fake office. She didn't hide in the guest house. Instead, she logged into her company's servers from her real laptop and scheduled a press release. One that would officially mark her return to the business world after months of retreat. Her assistant, confused but obedient, made the arrangements. Sloane wrote the statement herself. Short, powerful. Sloane Ashford returns to Ashford Properties after an extended personal leave. She has no further comments except to say, "I finally remembered what matters." The story made headlines within an hour, and with it, Sloane's world and June's shifted again. That night, while June bathed Luca upstairs, Sloane sat alone in the living room. Phone buzzing non-stop. Messages from former friends, board members, journalists, her lawyer, and Serena. Sloane stared at the message Serena had just sent. One line. "So, you've made your choice. Let's see if she survives it." Before Sloane could respond, her phone rang. It wasn't Serena. It was her lawyer. "Sloane," he said without preamble, "we've got a problem." Sloane's pulse spiked. "What now?" Serena filed a motion with the court. She's demanding shared custody of Luca, and she's claiming emotional instability. That your recent disappearance was part of a breakdown. Sloane stood up so fast the chair nearly tipped over. She doesn't care about Luca. This is revenge. I know. But we have to prepare. If this goes public, she'll do everything she can to drag you and anyone close to you through the mud. Sloane ended the call and stood in the center of the room, hands trembling. June came down a minute later, towel draped over her shoulder, hair damp, smiling, until she saw Sloane's face. What happened? She asked, instantly alert. Sloane looked at her, the fear rising again, raw and real. She's trying to take him. She's using the courts. Using you. She'll try to make it seem like I'm unstable, that I left the company for a breakdown, that you seduced me into this fake life. June didn't flinch. Then we fight. Sloane's eyes filled. What if I lose? June stepped forward, grabbed her hand. Then you fight harder. And this time, you don't do it alone. Sloane's breath shook. I don't know how to let people fight for me. You just did, June whispered. Let me in all the way. And Sloane did. But they both knew the next battle wouldn't be emotional. It would be legal, public, ruthless. And Serena wasn't done. Not even close. The courthouse smelled like old wood and nerves. Sloane sat stiffly on the bench, dressed in a navy blue suit tailored to perfection. Her posture straight, her jaw tight, every movement calculated. But her hands betrayed her. They trembled softly on her lap, fingers curled in and out of fists. She had been in boardrooms with billion-dollar contracts on the table and hadn't blinked. But now, with her son's future at stake, she could barely breathe. June sat beside her, not in the shadows, not hidden, in plain view, wearing a soft cream blouse. Her hair pulled back, eyes locked forward like a shield made of quiet strength. She had insisted on coming, even after Sloane begged her not to. If I'm part of the story, then I'll be part of the fight, she had said. And Sloane had let her because deep down she needed her. The room was already buzzing when Serena entered. All silk and venom as always, dressed in sharp white like a twisted angel. Her expression calm and polished. She offered Sloane a tight smile. Nice of you to bring the nanny to court. Bold move. Sloane didn't respond. She didn't have to. She learned by now. Serena fed off reaction, attention, power, and today she would get none. The judge entered and silence fell. The proceedings began. Serena's lawyer went first, painting Sloane as an unstable mother who had abandoned her empire, faked poverty, and entered an inappropriate relationship with an employee while caring for a child. Every sentence was a dagger. June watched the narrative unravel, twisting everything beautiful between her and Sloane into something dirty, manipulative. She removed her son from a stable environment. The lawyer said she disappeared from the public eye, relinquishing responsibility to a woman with no verified credentials. And now she lives with this employee in a romantic relationship. That has never been disclosed to authorities. Is this the environment best suited for a child? Sloane's lawyer rose to respond, but Sloane touched his arm. Let me speak. The judge nodded. Sloane stood slowly. Her voice was clear, measured. I built my company from the ground up. I worked 90-hour weeks. I was praised for it. But when I realized my son was beginning to see nannies more than me, when I realized he didn't smile anymore, I was told to delicate, to be efficient. When I left my company temporarily to focus on my child's emotional health, I was called unstable. When I fell in love with someone who actually loves him, not his name, not his inheritance, I was told I was reckless. All because I made a choice every father in a suit gets applauded for. I chose my child. The courtroom was silent. Even Serena shifted. Sloane turned to June. She didn't seduce me. I chased her. I tested her. I doubted her. And through it all, she showed up. Not for money, not for comfort, but for my son and for me. If that's a crime, then I'll take the sentence. The judge paused, scribbled a few notes, and recessed for deliberation. Outside the courtroom, Sloane leaned against the wall, head bowed. June stood beside her. You are perfect, she whispered. Even if we lose, Sloane murmured. I'm done hiding. An hour later, the judge returned. There is no substantial evidence to suggest emotional unfitness. The court denies Serena Blackwood's petition for shared custody. Luca Ashford remains under the full care of his mother. Sloane didn't exhale until the gavel hit the block. June's hand was already gripping hers. Serena stood face blank, but her eyes were acid. She walked over slowly like a serpent who had just missed her strike. "Enjoy your little romance while it lasts," she said under her breath. "Eventually, everyone leaves you." Sloane didn't flinch, but June did. She stepped forward, voice low and fierce. "I'm not everyone." Serena's mouth twitched, but she turned and walked out without another word. Later that night, back at the house, Sloane walked into Luca's room and sat on the edge of his bed. He was already half asleep, bear tucked under his arm. "You're staying, right?" he murmured, eyes closed. Sloane brushed a hand through his curls. "I'll always stay." "What about Jules?" he asked. Sloane smiled. "She's staying, too." Downstairs, June waited on the porch, barefoot under the stars. When Sloane came out, she didn't speak. She just walked straight into June's arms, buried her face in her neck, and held her like a woman who had finally stopped falling. They sat down together on the porch swing, wrapped in silence and each other. "I'm yours," Sloane whispered. "Whatever you want. However you want me." June turned to her, eyes shining. "Then let me want all of you, not just the strong parts, the scared parts, too." Sloane nodded, pressing their foreheads together. "Then you're getting everything." And for the first time in years, Sloane Ashford felt free. But inside on the kitchen counter, Sloane's phone lit up again. Another message. "Anonymous. Court may be over, but the press is just getting started." It started with one headline. Subtle, almost respectful. "Real estate titan Sloane Ashford resurfaces after private hiatus with mystery woman by her side." There was no photo, just speculation. Then came another sharper nanny turned girlfriend inside Sloane Ashford's secret romance. And then the avalanche hit. Photos of June leaving the courthouse. Blurry shots of them on the porch. Anonymous sources quoting insiders about Sloane's so-called breakdown. And concerning attachment to her employee. The media didn't just pry. It sank its claws into every corner of their lives. Within 72 hours, Sloane's name was trending online. Not for her empire, not for her victory in court, but for her love life. She stood in the kitchen on the third morning, phone face down, eyes on nothing. June had just finished making pancakes with Luca, and was trying unsuccessfully to act like everything was normal. Sloane hadn't spoken much since the headlines exploded, and June understood why. But silence had a weight, and it was starting to crush them both. "Talk to me," June said at last, stepping into Sloane's space. Sloane met her gaze, eyes tired but keen. "About what? That the world thinks you're sleeping your way into a fortune? That I've lost the narrative again? That everything I tried to protect is getting turned into a punchline?" June didn't retreat. "No, about you. About what you're feeling. You're not alone in this, Sloane. Stop acting like you are." Sloane closed her eyes for a beat. "I've weathered hostile takeovers, smear pieces, betrayals from people I trusted for years." She opened them, voice fraying. "But this is the first time someone I love is in the crossfire because of me." June moved closer and framed Sloane's face in her hands. "Then stop treating me like glass. I knew what I was walking into, and I don't care what they say as long as Luca's okay. As long as you're okay." Sloane's hands rose to grasp June's wrists. Her answer was a whisper. "I don't want you to regret this." "Then don't give me a reason to," June said softly, and kissed her. That day, Sloane's PR team wouldn't stop calling. "We need a statement," her assistant pleaded. "People want answers. The board wants to know what's happening. What's happening is none of their business." Sloane muttered. "Then make it their business," the assistant pressed. "Control the story before Serena does." That night, in her home office, Sloane wrote a letter, not a press release, not a sanitized PR exercise. A letter. Honest, sharp, unafraid. My name is Sloane Ashford. I am the founder and CEO of Ashford Properties. I am also a mother. And yes, I am in a relationship with the woman who once cared for my son. This is not a scandal. This is not a secret. This is the best decision of my life. June Carter is not my employee. She is my partner. She is the person who saw me when I'd forgotten how to be seen. She is the reason my son laughs again. If the world has a problem with that, they can find better uses for their time than judging women for loving each other. She posted it to her verified profile without warning. Within minutes, it exploded. Thousands of likes, comments, support, hate, everything. June saw it appear on her feed and felt her breath catch. She ran into the office and found Sloane standing by the window, arms crossed, jaw tight. You really did it, June whispered. Sloane turned to her. I told you no more hiding. That night, Luca couldn't sleep. June lay with him on the bed, telling him stories until his eyes finally fluttered closed. She stayed a while, brushing his hair back, holding the space that had once felt temporary, but now pulsed with permanence. When she returned to the bedroom, Sloane was in bed already, sheets pulled up to her chest, eyes searching June's face. Do you regret any of this? She asked quietly. June climbed in beside her, slid under the covers, and pulled Sloane close. I regret not finding you sooner. Sloane exhaled into her skin, eyes closing. They're going to keep coming for us. The press, Serena, all of them. Then let them come, June murmured. I'm not afraid of being seen anymore. But just as they began to find calm again, reality cracked open once more. The next morning, Sloane opened her front door to find a man standing there, mid-50s, polished, wearing a smug smile and a badge clipped to his coat. Ms. Ashford, he said, extending a file. You're being served. Sloane blinked, heart thudding. What is this? Preliminary investigation. Allegations of misconduct, exploitation, workplace boundaries. She stared at him, then at the document. Inside, Serena's fingerprints again. A new strategy, a new war. She was trying to destroy Sloane's company from the inside to paint her relationship with June not just as scandalous but criminal. Sloane closed the door without a word, locking it behind her. June stood in the hallway. What was that? Sloane looked up, fire beginning to rise in her chest. She's going after the company now. June's breath caught. What do we do? Sloane looked her in the eyes. No more fear, only fury. We end this on our terms. The world didn't fall apart in a scream. It unraveled in whispers, in emails marked urgent, in voicemails from board members who once praised Sloane's brilliance and now questioned her judgment. The investigation Serena had triggered spread like a toxin. An official inquiry into workplace ethics, blurred boundaries, favoritism, words that didn't just threaten Sloane's company. They threatened her credibility, her legacy, and worst of all, her ability to shield June and Luca from the storm. Sloane spent hours in her home office, phone glued to her ear, voice clipped, collected, strategic. But beneath the surface, she was burning. June knew it. She felt it in every shift of Sloane's shoulders, every sleepless night. But Sloane wouldn't talk, wouldn't fall apart. Not where anyone could see. So June waited, watched, and quietly gathered her strength. Because if Sloane was going to face this fire, she wouldn't do it alone. Not this time. 3 nights after the legal summons arrived, June found Sloane sitting on the floor of Luca's room. The boy was asleep, sprawled across his sheets, clutching his bear like a lifeline. Sloane was motionless, back against the wall, eyes fixed on the shadows. June crouched beside her. Talk to me, she said softly. Sloane didn't move. I spent years building something that could withstand anything, and now she's using us to tear it down. Every message I sent you, every paycheck, every whisper between us, she's twisting it into something ugly. June touched her hand. Let her twist. We know the truth. Sloane looked at her, something raw in her voice. What if I lose the company? Then you start again, June whispered. And this time, you won't be alone when you do. Sloane exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for years. And then, for the first time in days, she let herself fall into June's arms, into her chest, into the one person who had never asked her for anything but her truth. The next morning, they began fighting back. Sloane's lawyers filed a formal countersuit exposing Serena's repeated harassment, surveillance, and manipulation. June provided her own written statement detailing how Sloane had been hesitant, almost too professional in the beginning, how she had been the one to initiate emotional closeness, how their connection had grown slowly, truthfully, without manipulation or leverage. But the media didn't care about slow truths. They cared about blood, and Serena knew exactly how to feed them. 2 days later, a leaked video hit the press. Security footage grainy angled just right showing Sloane and June in the kitchen. The night of the kiss. Their first. The clip cut just before contact, but it was clear enough. The headline screamed. Was this the moment Sloane crossed the line with her nanny? The footage didn't show emotion, didn't show context, just tension, intimacy, implied power. Sloane smashed a glass when she saw it. June didn't flinch. Let them watch, she said. Let them see what real looks like. Let them choke on it. But Sloane knew the damage was done. The clip was viral within hours. Every talk show, every blog, every late-night joke. June was no longer a mystery. She was a target. Sloane called an emergency meeting with her board. In person, she wore black, sharp heels, no apologies. She stood before the men and women she had once mentored, hired, led, and she told them everything. Not about the kiss, about the truth. I stepped away from this company to protect my son. I found someone who reminded me of who I was before the titles and the pressure. She didn't manipulate me. She challenged me. She made me better. If you believe love disqualifies leadership, then vote me out. But if you believe in rebuilding, in evolution, then stand with me. The vote was close, but in the end, Sloane remained CEO by 1 vote. When she got home that night, she collapsed into June's arms, laughing and crying all at once. We're still standing, she whispered. We're winning. June cubed her face. We've already won because she couldn't break us. But then Sloane's phone rang, a private number. She answered and Serena's voice oozed through like oil. Congratulations on the vote, but you might want to check your front page tomorrow. You know what they say. If you want to burn a queen, don't go for the crown, go for the child. Sloane froze. What did you do? But the call was already dead. The next morning, the front page hit every newsstand. Sloane Ashford's son, the real victim. The article blurred Luca's face, but described everything else in graphic detail. His age, his school, the custody battle, June's alleged influence. It was legal, but morally vile. Sloane stood in the kitchen, paper in hand, jaw clenched so tight she could barely speak. June read the headline over her shoulder and went pale. She's using him now to shame you, to bait me. Sloane turned, fire in her eyes. She can come after me. She can tear me apart in the press, but she doesn't touch him. June touched her chest, heartbeat steady. Then let's finish this publicly. Let the world see her for what she is. Sloane looked at her, at the woman who had walked into her life as a stranger, who had fought through every wall, and who now stood beside her, not just as a partner, but as the only person fierce enough to protect her family. Sloane took her hand. Then we end this together in the open. They had survived betrayal, the press, the courts. But this final blow, the one aimed at their heart, would take everything they had left. And they were ready. The studio lights were blinding. Sloane adjusted her earpiece while a production assistant dabbed powder across her cheekbones, muttering something about shine and angles. She wasn't listening. Her eyes were locked on the monitor ahead where her name was displayed in bold. Beneath the title of the primetime interview, Sloane Ashford breaks her silence. Beside her, June sat quietly, fingers laced over her lap, calm on the outside, but pulsing with fire underneath. Luca was home, guarded by security and a trusted friend. For the first time in days, the house was empty, and so were their excuses. It was time. The host stepped onto the set, all charm and smiles. But Sloane had chosen him carefully. He was respected, seasoned, known for cutting through gossip to find the core. If they were going to tell their truth, it had to be here. It had to be now. 3-1, the director called out. Cameras rolled. Tonight, the host began. We sit down with Sloane Ashford, billionaire CEO, mother, and now at the center of one of the most talked about media storms in recent history. She's joined by June Carter, the woman the tabloids can't stop speculating about. But tonight there are no rumors, only facts. Sloane didn't blink. She leaned forward. Then let's start with one. I'm not ashamed of the woman I love. And just like that, the interview ignited. Sloane spoke with clarity and control, walking through the beginning of it all. The decision to retreat from her public life, her desire to protect Luca, the choice to hide her identity, to find something real. She admitted every lie, every misstep. But when she spoke about June, her voice softened, raw and unwavering. I fell in love with someone who wasn't impressed by my net worth, but by how I read bedtime stories to my son. She didn't know my world, but she knew my heart. June spoke next, eyes clear. I was desperate for work when I met Sloane. That's true, but I stayed long after I could have left. I didn't fall for a CEO. I fell for the mother who tucked in her son every night like he was her entire world. I stayed for them, not for anything I could gain. The host asked about the investigation, the kiss, the video. Sloane didn't flinch. Yes, we kissed in my home. No, it wasn't coercive. No, it wasn't inappropriate. If anything, I waited too long to admit what I felt. And the boy, the host asked, what does Luca think of all this? June smiled, warmth blooming in her voice. He asked me yesterday if I was going to be his forever person. Sloane's eyes burned and she reached for June's hand on camera, unashamed. The interview aired live. No editing, no filters, just truth. And the world watched. The reaction wasn't immediate. It came in waves. First shock, then opinion pieces, then commentary. Some people called it brave, some called it foolish. But the most important responses came from the ones Sloane never expected. Her board sent a statement of support. Investors backed her. Employees, one silent, began sending messages. Thank you for showing up with honesty. Thank you for reminding us that leaders are still human. But Serena wasn't finished. Sloane received a final message that night. No threats, no venom, just a forwarded email chain between Serena and a journalist. One that proved Serena had orchestrated the leaked footage, the article about Luca, and worse, that she had offered money to a staff member in Sloane's house to plant a recording device in Luca's room. Sloane's hands shook as she showed it to June. She crossed a line, Sloane whispered. She crossed every line, June said. We end her now. The next morning, Sloane's legal team filed a formal complaint with the authorities, not just civil, but criminal. They had evidence now, surveillance, witness, testimony, digital trails. The case built fast with Sloane's lawyers moving at the speed of war. When the news broke that Serena Blackwood was under investigation for child endangerment, harassment, and conspiracy to defame, it was no longer Sloane's name in the headlines. It was hers. Sloane didn't gloat. She didn't have to. The truth finally held. 2 weeks later, the noise ebbed, the headlines shifted, the world moved on. Sloane and June didn't move on. They moved forward. Sloane brought June back not as a nanny, but as co-founder of a new foundation for single mothers and women rebuilding after trauma. She gave her an office, a title, and real autonomy. Not because I love you, Sloane said. Because you earned it. Luca adjusted easily. He called June his bonus mom, built Lego castles with 2 queens instead of a king and queen. One evening, the 3 of them sat on the porch watching the sky darken. Luca curled into June's lap, drowsy. Can we stay like this forever? He murmured. Sloane looked at June. June looked back. Forever starts now, Sloane said without hesitation. They couldn't know a final turn was coming. It would begin with a hospital call and end with a choice that would test love all over again. At 2:06 a.m., the phone rang. The house lay wrapped in night. Sloane stirred first, instincts sharper than sleep, catching the call before the second ring. June blinked awake as Sloane lifted the phone. Hello. Groggy, but alert. Ms. Ashford, this is Dr. Amara from Portland General Hospital. We're calling about your mother-in-law, Mrs. Carol Carter. Sloane shot upright, heart spiking. What happened? June's hand found her forearm, gripping tight. She collapsed at home, the doctor said, calm but urgent. Shallow breathing, loss of consciousness. She's stable now, but we need someone here. You're listed as emergency contact. The daughter's phone is off. We're on our way, Sloane said, already out of bed. They dressed in silence, urgency humming under their skin. June's fingers shook as she buttoned her jeans. It's bad, she whispered, like she already knew. Sloane kissed her temple. We'll get there. I've got you. Rain hammered the windshield on the drive long, quiet, relentless. June stared out at the blur of lights, chewing the inside of her cheek. Sloane drove like a woman possessed, steady and fast. At the June barely waited for the car to stop before running inside. Sloane followed. Room 217. Carol Carter lay pale and unconscious, an oxygen mask rising and falling to slowly over her face. A pulmonary embolism, a clot, the doctor explained. We caught it just in time, but her heart is weak. She'll need significant care and supervision, possibly around the clock. June stood at the bedside, brushing a strand of hair from her mother's forehead. She doesn't have anyone else, she whispered. Just me. Sloane stood behind her, quietly absorbing the weight in her voice. She knew what June wasn't saying. That night, they didn't return home. Sloane booked a private recovery suite at the hospital and stayed with June, curled on a too small couch, watching her sleep beside her mother's bed. 2 days later, the doctor called June into the hallway. Sloane followed. The doctor's face was neutral, professional, but her tone was gentler than before. We've reviewed her scans. There's more than we thought. Microclots in the lungs, scar tissue around the heart. We're looking at long-term care, maybe permanent. She'll need someone full-time, and soon. June nodded slowly, trying to stay composed. I'll figure it out. Sloane touched her arm. We'll figure it out. But June didn't answer. The next morning, back at home, the tension settled in like fog. They barely spoke over breakfast. Luca noticed the shift and clung to June more than usual. When he asked if Grandma Carol was going to die, June's voice cracked. I don't know, baby. I hope not. That night, after Luca was asleep, Sloane found June on the back porch sitting in the rain without flinching. Her hair was soaked, her face unreadable. Sloane stepped into the downpour, kneeling beside her. Talk to me. June didn't look at her. She has no one else. No savings, no insurance, no plan. I'm all she has. If she goes into full-time care, I have to be there. I have to be the one. Sloane's voice was steady. Okay, then we do that. June finally looked at her. Sloane, I don't think I can do both. Sloane felt it like a blade. What do you mean? I mean, I can't be into lives at once. I can't run the foundation, raise Luca, be your partner, and take care of my mom around the clock. It's not fair to any of you. Sloane took her hands. Then we adjust, we shift. You don't walk away from love just because life gets hard. June's eyes glistened. But what if I have to? Sloane's grip tightened. No, You don't get to do that. Not after everything. Not after you fought through hell with me. You don't walk away now. June broke then, sobbing into Sloane's shoulder. Sloane held her, letting the reins soak them both. You're not doing this alone. If your mom needs full-time care, we'll make it happen. We'll move her in. We'll hire help. I'll restructure everything. You are not choosing between love and loyalty. You're allowed to have both. June pulled back, rain and tears streaking her cheeks. Why would you do that? Sloane smiled through the ache. Because I love you. Because Luca loves you. And because you deserve a life where you're allowed to receive, not just give. That night, they sat up in bed soaked in blankets, planning everything. Sloane called her legal team to transfer medical guardianship papers. She arranged for a nurse evaluation. She contacted specialists. Within 24 hours, Sloane's home had been fitted with equipment and converted into a part-time recovery space. Carol was discharged 2 days later and came home to a house that had moved mountains to receive her. When she saw what Sloane had done, she didn't speak, just looked at June and whispered, "She really loves you, doesn't she?" June nodded, voice tight. "Yeah, she really does." And for the first time, Carol smiled. But late that night, after everyone had gone to bed, June slipped into the hallway, phone in hand. She scrolled through the latest offer sitting in her inbox. An international organization offering her a fully funded role to lead a new foundation branch in Europe. 6 months. Independent. Prestigious. Sloane didn't know about it yet, and June didn't know what she was going to do. Not yet. But soon she'd have to choose between a dream she'd never thought possible and a love she never expected to find. June stood in the hallway long after the screen had gone dark. Her phone rested heavy in her hand, the email glowing like a portal to another life. The offer was everything she'd ever dreamed of. Respect, autonomy, impact, freedom. And yet, as she stared at the silent house around her, her heart warred with her mind. Sloane was asleep upstairs, curled beside Luca in the big bed, a book still open on the pillow where she'd been reading to him before he drifted off. Her mother was in the guest wing, breathing easier now, watched by a discreet private nurse Sloane had hired without blinking. Everything around June was soft and safe and built on a foundation she'd never had before. Love, home. But something inside her whispered, "Don't lose yourself again." The next morning, she didn't say anything. She couldn't. Sloane was glowing, busy in the kitchen with Luca, teaching him how to whisk pancake batter. He spilled flour on the floor, and Sloane laughed, really laughed unguarded. June stood in the doorway and felt her chest twist in quiet panic. How do you choose between the person you've become and the person you love? But she couldn't keep it in forever. That night, after Luca was asleep, after her mother was settled with her favorite music playing softly in the background, June found Sloane on the porch. The wind was warm, the stars low and full. Sloane had a glass of wine in her hand and that rare, quiet look of peace on her face. June's heart had. "I need to tell you something," June said. Sloane turned slowly. "Okay." June sat beside her, folding her legs underneath her. "A few days ago, I got an offer from an international foundation. They want me to lead a 6-month project in Paris. Full autonomy. All expenses. Big platform. It's the kind of thing I never thought would be possible for someone like me." Sloane didn't speak right away. She took a sip of wine, then another, her expression unreadable. And I haven't said yes or no." June's voice trembled because part of me feels like I'd be betraying everything we built if I left. But another part of me is scared that if I don't go, I'll start to lose myself again. That I'll wake up one day and wonder what else I could have done, who else I could have been. Sloane set the wine down, looked at her, really looked. "Do you love me?" June blinked. "Yes, with everything." "Do you love Luca?" "You know I do." "Then go." June froze. "What?" Sloane reached for her hand. "Go. Take the offer. Take the dream. Become everything you're meant to be." Because if you don't, you'll resent me. And I love you too much to let you shrink in my shadow. June's eyes filled. But what if I lose you? Sloane shook her head. You won't. This isn't goodbye. This is just space, growth, trust. I'll be here. We'll be here. And when you come back, it'll be because you chose us again, not because you were afraid to choose yourself. June let the tears fall then, and Sloane held her, both of them wrapped in the certainty that love doesn't always mean holding tight. Sometimes it means letting go and believing they'll return stronger. 2 weeks later, June stood at the airport, suitcase in hand, her mother waving from a nearby bench. Healthy and stable, Sloane beside her, hand on Luca's shoulder. June knelt, kissed Luca's forehead. You be good. Okay, will you bring me something French? He asked seriously. She laughed through the ache. I'll bring you everything French. She stood, turned to Sloane. I don't have the right words for this. Sloane kissed her softly, lingering. Then don't say anything. Just go and come back. June nodded, stepped away, turned once more at the gate. Sloane was still there, still watching, still hers. 6 months later, the house smelled like cinnamon and pine. Sloane stood in the kitchen, apron on, Luca beside her, rolling out cookie dough. Carol sat by the window with a book in her lap and a smile on her face. There was peace now, real peace. And then the front door opened. June stepped inside, wind in her hair, cheeks flushed from the cold. Her suitcase hit the floor. Sloane turned and every part of her stilled. June said nothing. She just walked forward and kissed her long deep. Certain. Luca shouted, she's back, and ran to hug her legs. June knelt and scooped him up laughing. Miss me? You were gone forever. Never again, she whispered. Never again. Sloane stepped forward, brushing a tear from June's cheek. Did you find what you were looking for? June nodded. I found me, but the whole time I missed us more. Sloane pulled her into an embrace that felt like the closing of a perfect circle. They didn't need a wedding or promises or headlines. They had love, a family, a second chance. And this time, nothing would come between them again. Not secrets, not fear, not even the dreams that took them apart. Because they'd always find their way back. If you enjoyed this content and want to support the channel in a special way, try clicking the thanks button below. It's the one with the heart and $sign icon. With super thanks, you can make a direct contribution to the channel, which helps me keep creating awesome videos for you.